We're live.
Second guest lectures, Tinder in the city. We move on from the topic of internet in the city to the one of Tinder. So we go a little bit more into the topic of the course, relations in the city. So I think we can start here. Please be very careful, pay attention. Because basically what she's going to show you is the result of a huge investigation on Tinder. And it is like what you need to do it for 10 days, or I hope you did it for 10 days, she's doing it for months. So check it and compare with what you did have and everything you faced during this investigation. This is to design what they have asked. They're going to do it as well. And for business angles, many different ways to approach the digital and the city and the city. So it's very related to what we need from
Okay, so we actually even have the 4 online viewers. So nice to have them with us as well. It's almost midnight in Milan, so I will try to be super short, not to fall asleep in the meanwhile. Okay, I'm starting to share the screen, and let me check, because my computer is being super slow and weird and doesn't want to do what I want from him. Okay, I think we're not going full screen. No, we're going full screen. Okay. Can you hear me? Because I stopped hearing you.
Yes.
Okay, fine, perfect. So today is the lecture about Tinder and the city, as everyone knows. And well, so we're on the cover, right? Can you confirm that you see the sharing screen, because last time we had a problem with this?
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, wait a second. Okay, let's try one more time. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going full screen then. Okay, so it's Tinder and the city. Next slide, please. It's the disclaimer, because this is a very subjective research that I've done, because it's not like the last time that we were talking about internet in the city, which was my thesis research. Here it was initiated completely by myself, and I never thought that we're going to come to this point of lecture. So I tried not to harm any human beings in the process, but let's say it was not that easy. And I'm not going to tell you how to improve your Tinder performance. There are people to do that better than me. So I will provide some references, but it's not about that. Next slide, please. To bridge the gap between 2 lectures and to bring some essence of the internet and the city, we can, let's say, specify 4 main issues which are important for us now. It is that with the internet and all the devices around us, what happens is that we're being constantly connected, and we're communicating in a mediated way, which is very important for Tinder, with the networks holding and processing huge amounts of data in real time. So next slide. Each point of these has its own implications. We already talked last time about the being constantly connected and how it affects our relation to the space, the physical space around us. So it's about the different senses which we can involve, about the interaction in different time and space. And we can see that on the example of Tinder today. Next slide, please. What's very important, which we didn't talk last time, is that communication is happening in a mediated way. So you never just have all the same freedom that you had before, and you constant. Yes. Okay, sorry, I was trying to make it fast. Yes, okay. Okay, so we always communicate in a mediated way with people on the internet because there are protocols or interfaces designed by someone, and they of course define the way that we can interact. Next slide is about the networks. It is important to understand that networks have their dynamics and their laws in a way that they work. So one of them is, for example, the value is based on the number of users. So we know that perfectly in example of Facebook, for example, that it wouldn't have any value if you were alone there. Next slide is about the data in real time. So this is crucial for the stuff like self-driving cars, but also for the any moment that you interact with these simple applications like Google Maps or whatever, but also for the simple things, not only the super high technological, but if you think of you go to the bus stop and you see the screen which tells you when the bus is gonna arrive. This was not possible to be done without the internet and the life before. So we're passing from the huge technological differences to the small ones, which just make our lives better. And of course, a lot of them are social, like Tinder, to which we're gonna pass. So next slide. Putting these 4 elements to compare Tinder and the bar on your corner, you can understand that they differ a lot in terms of what you can get as if you want to date. So, for example, normally there are people all the time on Tinder, and on the contrary, in the bar, on the corner, there are certain times, and you have to go there physically to discover if there's someone or not. Info about the person is limited on Tinder because, as I told, that this is mediated world. So only there's a format which you have to fill in, and on the contrary, in the real life, you can discover all the information at once. Then on Tinder, you're always, let's say, equally connected with the people who have the same goal. But sometimes it can happen that you have just few users if there is a small city where no one uses it. At the bar, of course, there usually will be people, but some of them will be just patrons which know each other already. There will be people who came there with friends and have completely different goals than you. And the 4th element is that you can always get access to a lot of people on Tinder, for example, but also you exchange your information about your behavior and everything. And in the bar, you always get the limited amount of people in each moment. So next slide, it's about the Tinder search path, which passed from my personal experience on Tinder to the observations which I had of my friends and seeing and talking to them on how was it going. And then Tinder with the whole world and all the different applications. So all the theoretical research, let's say. Next slide. So how I'm hacking myself with Tinder. Next slide. Let's say, who is Yulya? Why Yulya has started using Tinder?
1 second.
Yes. What's going on? Okay, you're on the slide of who's Yulya.
Yes.
Okay. So let's say I'm an introvert and workaholic with Rapunzel syndrome, which is mainly that I'm super picky and don't like many people. Then the situation is now I find myself working mainly from home in a micro collective, and I'm not that well integrated in the place where I am now in Milan. Then socioculturally, I'm coming from a group which is not that really dating. Let's say it wasn't inherited in my cultural background, let's say, which I will explain in the next slide. And in terms of relationships, I'm finding myself mostly single in Italy since long ago. And I started to question whether it was connected to my moving from Russia to Italy, if there's some cultural things going on and how to deal with them. So I found out about Tinder 2 years ago, but installed it only this year in the beginning of autumn. Next slide, please. This is just to tell 2 words about the how things are happening in the world, because it's important to understand that we're talking about completely different realities, and that applications work especially different when you put them on different contexts. So I'm coming from Vladikavkaz, which is a very small, well, it's not very small, but it's located in a small Caucasian republic, which is very conservative. You don't hook up, obviously, and you usually date very, let's say, people that you find to know in person because of your close connections. Then I moved to Zelenograd, which is almost Moscow, but not really. It's also characterized by the early marriages and the will to get to have nuclear family quite early. So, for example, this time when I went there, I didn't even talk to any of my friends about Tinder and their experience, because I knew that it was absolutely not used there by people. And on the contrary, in Milan, here Marco can correct me if I'm wrong, the point is it's European place with the liberated approach to relationship, but still it's post-Catholic, so there are some specific conservative still issues going on, let's say. So it's not like the things that we can read about states and how they are much more liberated in terms of hookup culture and stuff like this. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so next slide is about the goals of research. I was trying to hack myself by putting some clear questions. So to understand whether the problem is that I'm not meeting enough people in daily life because I work from home, I don't meet that many people because I'm introvert, I don't go out that much, and so on. That I'm frustrated in general and I just don't like anyone anywhere, or it's incompatibility with specifically the context. So I don't like them, they don't like me. And of course it was the practice, so embrace diversity, chat with strangers, and so on. Next slide is about the actions. So it was clear that the first goal would be solved with the applications. So if I don't meet people in daily life on Tinder, there are thousands of them and it will be solved. The second one won't be solved anyway. And the third one can be quantified. This was actually the main reason why I started using Tinder, because it was possible to count how many people I was liking in different places. And of course, the practice can be reached with the application easily. Next slide is about the apps. So I tried different, like 10 different applications, and I have to say that Tinder wins for me. I didn't like the interface of some of them were not working in Milan, and some of them were just completely crazy, like the Blender ones. They also downloaded Spooner, which I didn't include yet because it's an application to find a stranger to cuddle, which is quite weird, let's say. I will try it later. So my Tinder profile, next slide, is quite simple. Let's say it's mostly the pictures from my, well, it is the pictures from my Facebook, as all the people are required to do so, taken by my friends, and only 2 selfies there. It's a little bit better version of myself, I think, than normally, because normally I look like this on the right nerdy girl with quite a serious expression. But so far it works. So next slide. First impression of Tinder. I seriously suggest you to watch this video on YouTube, which you can find then in the slides. It's about the... Okay, perfect. Okay, so it's the Korean girls. Okay, they're trying Tinder for the first time, and it does really capture the moment of trying it very well. Next slide. Yeah, it's pretty much like that you first time you see profiles and you're disgusted and shocked. Then you start matching with people and you don't know what to do with that at all. And then, of course, the conversations start to go on weirdly and it follows. So actually, I have to say that at first I got overwhelmed. Like I installed it and I almost didn't use it for a while. I got also stalked on Facebook and Instagram. And for a while, I was really overwhelmed and frustrated with this and not using that much. So next slide. But after a while, I decided to start with the experiments to make them quite structured. So the first one was about quantifying and comparing attraction to people, my attraction meaning to people in different locations. So it's super easy. First, I count how many profiles I swiped in total. Then I check how many I liked. So it's like I swiped 10, if I liked 1 or 0 or 5, I count it. I get the percentage and compare it in different cities. So next slide. We're at the backstage slide, yeah? Maybe I yes, okay. So this is because Marco asked me to show you well all the tools and things, how they were made. So it's super simple. You see on the left, it's my Google Keep kind of notebook tool. So I just count and I put these rows of the numbers. And then at some point, Google Keep is one of the Google products where you basically just put the notes. You can use whichever, let's say, way to use the notes. So to put the notes, like you can use your notebook. It's just much more easy for me to use it this way. You can use Evernote or whatever. And then Google Spreadsheets, which is the kind of known spreadsheets like Excel, whatever, but shared. So I have the Tinder log there, and you see that numbers on the left are the people that I liked, numbers on the right are the people that I swiped. Then I just calculated the totals using the small, simple formulas there. Yes?
So the column is each number.
Yes? Yes, exactly. Yes. It's a swiping session. Yes. Okay. Okay, then you see the total and the percentages and the graph, which we're going to see next. So next slide is the results. So we will jump to them directly. We can see that in Milan it lasted 4 months, in Moscow 2 weeks, and in Lisbon I've been for 4 days. And to look for quite a lot of profiles. It's about 1,500 in total. So the percentage, it seems like Moscow kind of wins, but not that much, let's say. It's not that relative 1%, it's not that big. It was very strange in Russia because you see that there's Russians liked it's because there is almost a third of people on Tinder is the foreigners, and not necessarily the foreigners which are present in Moscow. There are some people that just want to chat with Russian girls, let's say, and use it this way. So quite obviously we can see here that numbers tell their story, that they tell that I'm much less liking people than the average female user of Tinder, which you can see it's 14% provided by them. And that it's very interesting that swiping with friends helps a lot to affect this average. So when we are with some people together, or when I ask some people to swipe for me, we reached 13% of likes. So this way we already got some results. Then I have proceeded, next slide. So comparing my use patterns. Actually, I just realized that I could do that when I saw it all in Google Spreadsheet. So it's very interesting because you see how the sessions change. That in the beginning I was in Milan on the left. You see that I was quite structured and just having the, sessions of 10 swipes every time or up to 30. And then it got a bit more impulsive and going up to, I don't know, I think 120 was the most swiped amount. It's because sometimes I have to say it was quite visible how my experience with Tinder was affecting these rates, that sometimes you go for a date and it's not very funny, and you start judging much more any profile that you encounter. So sometimes there are moments which out of 100 people I didn't like anyone. And on the contrary, in Moscow the pattern is very interesting because it passes on the contrary from the huge amounts, like there are sessions of 100 and something. In the end, they got less because I started to get more likes. I started to like more people in the less amount of profiles. So it was interesting because I couldn't, of course, get the proper reason, but one version is that Tinder has the adaptive algorithm, so it understands who you like, which is profile which you like. So if I changed my location, of course, it had like the different base of users, and so it couldn't give me the people I liked from the beginning. After a while, it started to adapt. Otherwise, it could be that people were not using it during the Christmas, New Year holidays, because that was the time when I was there in Moscow. So you can see that these are interesting time-based issues, which you can see when you have some statistic which is long enough, and the quantitative info gets into the kind of qualitative in some way. So next slide, please. We're talking about experiment 2 now, which is, let's say, one thing is to see how I like people, another thing is to see how they like me. So this one was about quantifying my attractiveness. So how many people like me and how many people talk to me and so on. So the idea was to swipe 50 profiles right in a row, count how many matches I'm gonna get, count how many discussions are gonna be initiated by people, then observe how discussions go, because at that stage I was participating in every discussion, and how many dates you can get the invitation to dates in 70 hours in the different places. So compare the results means I did in different places. It was based on the experiment which I saw online. It was about testing the men versus women on Tinder. So they made this in LA. They took two quite similar profiles, let's say the same age, attractive people, even almost the same name, and they just swiped 1,000 right, and then in 24 hours they saw the different results. So we can see that this girl in LA, she's got how many 70% match rate, which was actually lower than what I got in Milan, which surprised me a lot. So out of 50 people that I swiped right, I got 46 matches in total in 72 hours. 24 of them wrote to me quite immediately in the, yes? Sorry, oh, sorry, excuse me. At the results where there's Milan, it's number 25. Sorry, excuse me.
So this one is the slide of the work-based part. If you find 1,000 left, and then analyze what happened will the next percent. Okay? So you're going to need the same on 50 people and this next slide. So we can start them.
Okay, excuse me. Yes, so the results in Milan. 46 matches in total in 72 hours, 92 matches rate. 24 people wrote to me immediately in 24 hours. So let's say I also analyzed conversations. I didn't lead them, but I was trying to be like responsive in a mirror way. So when they were saying hi, I was saying hi, and so on. One conversation I didn't feel like proceeding with, so apparently something weird was going on there. 7 conversations just didn't go on, not because of me, but because guys just disappeared. I got 7 dates invitation based on these 24 conversations. 3 people, it's interesting that 3 people asked for WhatsApp, and this is something that happens a lot on Tinder. Apparently people don't really like their chatting interface, and of course they want to get your number. Yes?
Widens the span of opportunities to interact with people we have. We have transmedia and
Marco?
so it's interesting because you move from one medium to another, from Tinder to WhatsApp to I left the so strong. So that's the activity between the physical and the digital is continuous, and it's quite quick. It has a short time delay.
Yes.
And this relates to this conversation we had with the architect. Like, it's not that the digital is preventing us from seeing people in real life, it's expanding the opportunity. Because we relate with them on different channels simultaneously or in seconds.
Okay, yeah, that's completely true. So eventually 4 conversations got stuck. One was fantastic, just the best thing that ever happened to me on Tinder, conversation about gravity, which was super scientific and the most interesting discussion ever. Then 22 conversations were initiated by me. I've got 14 replies for this, so we can say that 17% of total silence existed on Tinder. So like 17 people got matched with me, but never wrote or replied to me. So just one said that he wanted only sex and said sorry. 7 finished after just few messages. Let's say that the second round was quite difficult. They were not very active, the guys, and it was not going very well, but still 2 dates invitation I received. So in 72 hours, it was 9 dates invitations in total, 2 actual dates with one of the guys. Then next slide is results for Moscow. Moscow was quite frustrating because out of 50 swipes right, I got just 14 matches. And the numbers which you see here, they surprised me because from my first perception, it was completely different thing. It was moving super slowly. Guys were not really interested in chatting and getting to know me. They just suddenly, sometimes they wanted to meet, but they were not interested to, get to know each other before meeting. So 8 conversations were started by guys. Out of them, 3 dates invitations. One of them unmatched me immediately because I didn't want to meet with him. Another one, I said maybe we could meet, but and he just unmatched me after a while without any reason. 6 conversations were initiated by me after, when the guys didn't write, so 3 of them replied. Just again, we have the 21% of total silence of people who don't chat with you at all. And once again, one one wanted to stay the first night before wedding in Vegas. It was quite funny because he was suggesting to go to Vegas immediately in his profile, but then turned out it was not working that easily. And some people just disappeared or nothing happened. So I got 3 dates invitations in total in Moscow, which is 21% of date rate. Which seems like the same in percentage as in Milan, but it's quite different when you talk to people in reality. So next slide, I did remake the experiment in Milan just to confirm the statistics. So I liked 100 people this time, and I got 87 matches in 24 hours. Actually, today some matches added up also. So it's 87 match rate, 87%, 48 conversations initiated by guys, 39 initiated after that by me. This time it's only 15% rate of total silence. And this experiment actually turned into the observing of reactions when I'm not replying. Because you can see that on the internet, people complain a lot that when girl stops replying to guy, they call her just a stupid idiot and so on, and just start to be very aggressive and not nice at all. So I don't want to continue 100 of conversations, quite impossible. So let's see what this silence will bring. One already stalked me on Facebook. One tried to win me with his giftiness, but it didn't really work, none of them. So next slide, Italians do it better, we can say, in a sense that it's absolutely noted by me that Italians were, well, people in Milan, let's say, they were different people. They were much more active, much more interested in having conversations, actually. not only in meeting immediately, but in just talking, getting to know each other. And it's not just my observation. I actually have people in Russia who say, people who were both in Milan and Russia, say the same thing. Next slide. So actually the plan is to expand the geography and to see all the different places, because now with Tinder you can kind of travel virtually to the different places and meet people if you pay some money to them. And you see that, for example, Mexico is on the ninth place there in this chart, so it should be much more interesting than in Italy even. So next slide, it's the screenshots of the, Marco, do you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay, so the screenshots of the conversations, of course I cannot show you the details, but that's to show how it works. So I'm saving different profiles, different conversations to analyze them later. Next slide. So here we can see some of them without the names. These are the conversations which I received 2 days ago. It's from this experiment of 100 likes. So you see that all the messages that I received, they're quite nice. There's nothing bad and wrong. Like they're just ciao ciao, what are you doing, and so on. So no nightmares as described again on the internet about Tinder, no offensive offers and so on, but let's say not any of them, none of them is very interesting and catchy. They don't have like special approach to you, just ciao, which is not bad anyway. Next slide is, let's say, the observation of the profiles of people. So as I can show you the photos, but also you can find easily the photos online and so on. But normally it's like this. It's ridiculous amount of people with tigers and elephants and stuff like this. I don't know where they find them. And then it depends who's interested in what. If they're interested in drinking with bottles, so interested in sports and so on. It's quite rare to find a guy with a nice settings, nice guy just looking at the camera and smiling. It's quite rare people doing that. That's strange. So next slide is, let's say, the general conclusions of my experience. So yes.
What you mentioned when we talked about the necessity, the some kind of discourse, I would say it's not a conversation kind of based on the fact that relational dating seduction is not something that you wake up in the morning and you go out to the house. It's on the other something that has some passion when they hide. So we're talking why are you considering a situation what they behind and not. So if you look at the taxonomy of the topics of the features that you have made, you can get how the everyday based context of messages you can on who you are, you can give with the thing. So the feedback, once again, between the physical and the digital is continuous and finite time. So these are patterns that are super interesting both for series design and space, in this case architecture design. Okay. Sorry,
Okay. So the general observations, let's say, that most of them, as I said, were very decent. There was no problem with the sexual offers and so on. Let's say I submitted just one in 4 months to the Tinder feminist profile, which was very relative, though talk about age, height, how many people you meet on Tinder, and these kind of details, which I considered not very nice. Then it's interesting that when you go to WhatsApp, conversations develop. When you go to Facebook, they ask you to get to Facebook. They fade, so actually I stopped doing that. It was very exceptional moments that I did that. So no one got crazy from rejection so far. A few people were direct about sex, but they were, let's say, also quite in a normal way. then there are a lot of people who look for different things. Quite a lot of people who just look at the, well, they're bored at work and they want to know what's going on in Tinder. They want just to chat and find something, just entertainment. Then guys have problems with pictures, that's true. And in Milan, let's say they are more, as I said, they're much more active. And you can see the cultural differences in the photos that they put. So much more masculine approach with the torso, sports, and so on. In Moscow, there were a lot of married people who were specifying that they don't look for one-night stands, but for the long-term lovers. Some people divorced and putting pictures with the kids and so on. They were interested in meeting as soon as possible without chatting and getting to know you. Apparently, there are prostitutes using Tinder because every, I don't know, fifth male has the comment that not interested in love for money. A lot of foreigners, and they behave not very nicely. And apparently, the adaptive talk before they work. So next slide is about the dating. Okay. Yes, sure. So this is about dating. Dates were out of the experiment, let's say, but I was still observing them. So I didn't experiment on people. This is quite important, that all the dates were genuine. I was interested in seeing those people. It's not that I did that only just to prove some points in research, which I did sometimes in the conversations. So I had the rule that it should be comfortable, so not more than once a week for me. So this way the 10 dates that I had happened in 2.5 months. So it started only in October, 2 months after I installed Tinder, because I didn't feel comfortable about it before. So I saw 6 guys in Milan, which gives like 0.24% of the total profiles which I've seen. 7 out of 10 were very interesting in a way of exploring new places in Milan, and we went to some places I never knew. This is interesting that I met friends of 2 guys, and 2 guys met my friends. So this was quite unexpected, let's say, from Tinder dates, because you usually don't perceive it this way, that it's the people who you would introduce to your friends immediately. And we had just decent conversations also at the dates. There were no expectation to have a hookup immediately. So next slide is the personal conclusions. We get back to the goals ahead, and we can see how with the Tinder I understood them, that generally it was a combination, the problem was a combination of first 2, that with the like rate of around 3%, it's of course difficult in your normal daily life to meet enough people when you're not that much integrated in the environment. So the third part was completely irrelevant, because it doesn't matter for me if I'm in Moscow and Milan, the rate doesn't change, and well, in Italy the activity is quite high. And of course, the practice, it happened, so I had more dates than in any other year before with more people. So it was quite interesting. Next slide, please. This is also my personal pattern of liking, because I understood that I'm being quite superficial in the way that I like the profiles. So it's always the combination of beard, glasses, and a guy being slim or tall. So apparently one day we'll find my Prince Charming in the middle. And there are some deal breakers, of course, which you can see on the left, and compensations. For example, the last one is super funny, because sometimes I was writing to people just because their profiles looked funny. Like there was a guy who looked completely like Putin. Of course, I didn't really like him. I just wrote him, it was funny, and so on. Or sometimes there were nerdy references to Star Wars and so on. So I wanted to talk about that, and that's it. Next slide. That's a pity that Bill Bob Turtle never wrote to me. It was a match, but never happened to find out about him. Next slide is the conclusions, let's say the general one, pluses and minuses of Tinder. I never loved so much online in my life. I've never been so exhausted of communication. This experiment of 50 people, liking 50 people and sustaining 50 conversations was quite challenging. I found out that after a while you got really frustrated with the things that people say and ask you, and so it's difficult. I've never talked to so many strangers and never got so frustrated, because when you look at the many profiles and you don't like anyone, it's quite difficult feeling for yourself. I've never been to so many dates, and I've seen the places in the city, enjoyed all the dates. That was interesting, but let's say I wouldn't go on dates with some people of those that I went with, because if I met them offline, I've seen them, and I really, which is both plus and minus, because in a way it makes you get out of your normal zone and to try something different. And yeah, I got stalked online quite a lot, but okay, that happens. And the interesting part, I started evaluating people offline quite much more than before. So this, you know, when you get to look at people at thousands of profiles, you get to look at them also offline. I also noticed myself like looking at the LinkedIn people in terms if it was Tinder. It's quite weird sometimes. So next slide. This is very interesting, that it was brought to my attention by a friend that he believes that offline communication is much more effective. And for example, the Medicata, which is our project, which was made in Milan, are more efficient in terms of dating than Tinder. Well, I have to prove that for me it was not. I have spent hundreds of hours at Medicata during the 7 months which we were there, and often I was alone. Often I was not looking at my phone because I was observing people. And in that time, only one time someone approached me to get my number. It never happened in any other occasions. And on Tinder, on the contrary, it did happen for months for me to have quite 10 dates. So far, Tinder wins over the physical space for me. Next slide. So here we see that these are the 4 elements about which I told, and how they can be pluses and minuses depending on what happens. So that you can date everywhere, anytime, very fast, but you can also not be focused on what's going on around you and not encounter people in the physical place. That it's very comfortable on Tinder that you can block people and match people, and even for the offline behavior. So there is a if you went on a date and it didn't work well, you can block that user because they care about the base and clients. Then you can never know people that well when you see them just on screen. Also, private chat with strangers on screen is a dangerous place. I have really experienced it myself also, even if I'm not being an internet troll ever. But sometimes when I had these 50 conversations with people, I understood that just the 10th time replying about what you're doing in Milan, where you're from, and so on, it's really getting boring, and sometimes I was getting too sarcastic maybe. And that's why I can understand people are getting crazy on Tinder, because they believe that it's a stranger, you don't know him, you can't imagine his emotions. It's a private chat, and so you just say whatever, you don't care. But on the internet, private chat always quite easily becomes public chat. We should always remember that. Then the network issues work also, that people more or less equal in terms of what they're looking for, but as a network is connected to other networks, you can be stalked, especially if your name is quite distinctive, as it turns to be Yulya is, and so on. Then value drops with few users, and so on. And lots of data in real time means a lot of possible new connections, so good to know new people, but also value of each one of them drops. Also, service learns about you and defines your experience, which you can see is also positive or negative depending on how it defines that. So the next slide is the part 2. How did we have fun before Tinder? And I have to probably to get faster through them. So this is a real exclamation of my friend, because the next slide, it turned out that Tindering is a very social practice. So there's an offline community which assembles around the Tinder user, and influence is being spread. So if people sometimes hesitate about whether to use it or not, if they see you using it, they think, okay, I will try as well. So at least 3 people started to use it from the beginning of my experiment. Then you do also share with community online, so you share the screenshots and so on. Sometimes at the party you just, you talk to people all together, and you also swipe with friends because it's quite curious and interesting, which increases also your age. Sometimes you can also ask friends to swipe for you, and some incredible things happen. Okay, next slide is about how, because Mark also asked me to show you all the works. This is about the bookmarking all the information about Tinder. So I use this channel kit tool service, and it helps because you can bookmark the thing, you see the visual of it, and then you can add all those little things of the notes, like the quotes from those articles. So not to search again, open again a new article and search through it, you just take the copy paste and you get already all your notes. So next slide. Yes.
Collection of all the content produced during the process, as it is content useful to do it, or is it content produced by the process itself? So I have to
Okay, so the next slide is to show you that I have 3 channels there which are open and public, so you can access them. Basically, the biggest one is about the applications and dating, hookups, all these, which I call sexuality now, then about the female issues, about the urban space connection to it. So they will be available to all of you just to look at all the information. It's about 180 bookmarks, so quite a lot. Next slide, please. So let's see the bigger picture, because so far we talked about the personal experience, but sometimes people really underestimate what Tinder is, because it's a huge industry. If you think of the 50 million of people who tried online dating in States, for example, and that annual revenue of the online dating industry is $1.7 billion, it's incredible. And even marriages, 17% are based on starting on dating sites, and 20% of the committed relationships start there as well. So every 5th person is in the committed relationship based on the dating site. So we can't even think of how many more are there which are just dating. And Tinder is one of the hugest and fastest growing application and service. It's evaluated as $1.35 billion, which is huge, but evaluations differ. Some say it's 500 million. So it has 50 million Tinder users every month, 1 billion profile swipes every day, 1 billion, and 12 million matches made every day. So you can understand how huge is the amount of the rejections, and we will talk about this later. Next slide is the Tinder ecosystem, in terms that actually you start to uncover a lot of services which are connected to dating, which are like Uber, Airbnb, of course, social networks like Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever. Also, Tinder iWatch application, there is a special application which can swipe for you instead of you deciding. It tells you based on your heart rate whether you like someone or not. There are disposable phone numbers applications, so if you don't feel comfortable, you can use that one. And of course, the Netflix and chill is one of the biggest Urban Dictionary phrases of the last year, they say. So it is used to signify the hookup. You just cover it with the idea of watching Netflix. And who knows which else, what other services exist around. Next slide is about the, yes?
So here, just a small topic that can be connected to your experience. So once again, you start from one end to end many different experiences, both in real time and online.
Okay, so next one is the Tinder experts industry. It's huge. People do hire people to write on Tinder instead of them. And so other people also make money on that. There are dating coaches which help you to understand how to behave on Tinder, basically. Taking $50 per hour of the session, online, just phone connection. Next slide is, yeah, you can see that there are a lot of websites like Tinder Society, Tinder Advisors, and so on, and you can see the prices, which are quite huge, which help you to find the matches and so on. Next slide, so there are even books written on that. If you go to Amazon and search for Tinder, you'll find a lot of stuff, which is basically about the how to increase the amount of matches. It's like the previous pickup artists got the new genre in the Tinder. Next slide is Tinder and social media. Also, you can find a lot of stuff, and most of them, it's either sharing how to pick up people or judging people who try to pick you up. So there's Tinder moments, Tinder nightmares, and so on. Next slide. So we come to Tinder society and rituals. There was this huge article which made a lot of discussions online about the Tinder and the dawn of the dating apocalypse. But let's say for each article like that, you can find 2 other articles which criticize it, and not just 2, but many, many other. Because it's not true that you can just talk to, I don't know, 50 people and understand what does it mean to be on Tinder. Of course, you need to make huge researches, and unfortunately, the dating app research don't work that well. There is this source which you can go on that you find on the left, that every study about online dating contradicts the other one, because people just cannot understand what to perceive as success. What is it about? It's a date, or it's a relationship, or it's just having fun in any way. So it's quite difficult to evaluate the real qualitative effect of it. But still, next slide, it's interesting to see the demographics of Tinder in a way that you see that 30% of people claim to be married, 12% in relationships. So it's 42% of people who are somehow committed. Then you can see that Tinder is an interesting place because there is deficit of women, while in the most developed countries it's a deficit of men now. So on Tinder there are 62% of the male users and 38% of the female, which is changing the behavior of people there, of course. And you can see that 10% of sex offenders use online dating apps, which is quite scary, in fact. So next slide, let's talk about Tinder society and rituals for real. It can be told that Tinder affects the hookup, I don't know, trend, but that's not really believable, because there are many issues, huge global issues like sexual revolution, vacation, and so on, which started affecting this trend in the 60s and especially got very developed in 70s. So on the college campuses, dating was already fading at that moment and turning into hookups. This is based on the several articles, several scientific papers actually. So the internet is just one of the issues which help it, but we cannot say that internet is the cause of it. Next slide. It's very interesting to see also how people perceive when they talk about Tinder, that it's a heterosexual version of Grindr, which is contradicted by the very image that you can see here, that Tinder and Grindr has completely different profiles, completely different rituals of use. Grindr was very disruptive in some ways, but in terms that some people were complaining that it did ruin the gay neighborhoods in the cities, but at the same time, it made the encounters safe for people in the smaller towns where gay people had to hide in some terrible places and so on. And of course, their rituals are completely different from heterosexuals. So you can understand that through this launch of Blender app by Grindr, which didn't work that well at all. So Tinder is not the Grindr of heterosexuals, Blender is, and Blender actually doesn't work. It was, well, let's say for some people maybe it works, but for me, I evaluated it as just completely trash place. It was the only place where I got the male body pictures quite fast, and so I just canceled this application quite soon from my phone because it was not possible to find anything interesting there. So it's very important to understand that different people, different cultures, different communities and minorities have completely different approach. Yes? Sorry, gender and sexuality. Okay, so yeah, here's the picture about which I was talking about, that the users of both Tinder and Grindr notice the big difference. And so let's pass to the next one, where we can see actually how the initial behavior on Grindr had affected the development of app which has happened, which is the location-based application, which tells you, it traces your geolocation during the day and tells you with whom you have crossed the path. So then you can see that there are people who you constantly see in metro somewhere, but you never talk to them. So with this application you can. It has started with this practice which Grindr users had. So they were opening the application and keeping it open during the day. They were going around the places and just normal commuting. And finally, in the end, they were seeing, let's say, they were calling it phishing, so the results of the daily activity. So there were messages from people who were in the different places, not just around their home. Because Grindr, is important to understand that Grindr has the much more precise location than Tinder. On Tinder, you have only 2 kilometers, it's the smallest radius. On Grindr, it can be 200 meters and so on. So people were really sensing the city in a way through this application. Next slide. It's interesting how they also reflect on the proximity, enabling the arousal and the desire. They say that when you know that person is further than 1 kilometer, for example, you don't want to meet them. And when you see someone who is super close to you, you just immediately think of some one-night stand, which can be super easy. So in this way, they talk about the hybrids of the human with the technology, which can, your desire is actually affected by the technology, by knowing the location of other person without really seeing them. This is how the application can interact with the urban space in this way. So not only by distracting the gay neighborhoods, which is not true in any way, but also by completely making you think differently about the neighborhoods and your location around the places. So the next slide, this is also a video which I suggest you to watch. It's not connected in any way to the application, so it's about the nice, super short not dating episode, which represents quite a lot the way that people think about the dating in the physical space, let's say. So of course we can say that in some way internet and getting to know strangers online made us afraid of interacting in the physical space, and still we cannot say that it was Tinder to do it. That was happening from some many years before. Next slide is, let's talk about why does Tinder work actually. Next one. It works because it's actually the opposite. Okay, so it's the opposite to the dominating social media in a way that, next slide, it's about the public realm. Okay, it's about the public realm in a sense that normally in the social media we communicate with the bubbles, with our connections. In terms of in Tinder, their idea was to bring strangers, and so this way you connect with the people who you would meet normally at the streets, not through your friends. And okay, we need to hurry up, so let's pass very fastly about the main ideas. So that what I found very interesting on Tinder is how it's about judging. So next slide with the one about, it's not just about dating, it's about judging and ego boosting, and they are both based on judging. So let's say next slide and the next slide. Judging works because it's how we approach people on the streets normally. It's based on it's a base of rejection. Rejection is a base of selecting the best one. So in this way, for females it works even if they don't date, but they reject a lot of people. They think that they're selecting the best one. Then I judge you means that I'm better than you. This is what is the opposite to the social media, where normally you should be jealous of other people's life, but on the contrary, on Tinder you get finally to judge other people. So next slide, you judge on your own with friends publicly. And next one, it appears also in all the public domains, so there are the social media and even books. Next slide, the thing that Marco was talking before, that judging is not superficial, it's about the messages, it's not about the objectifying and just thinking about the meat, but about all the messages that you learn from the pictures. It's about the semiotics. So next slide is about the subconscious biases which we have. It's not just about the things which we can perceive easily and reasonably. Next slide. Also, Tinder is judging and ranking its users. So we are at the next slide of dystopia. And next one. So we are coming to the point that dating is one of the rituals which affects mating. And mating is defining eventually the human race because it's about the reproduction of it. So next slide, what if people would use not just meeting on the streets and through friends, but they will suddenly be affected by the dating services quite a lot. Next slide, it brings the question of who affects it, who controls it. So are we gonna come, if the Tinder starts to rank its users by the desirability, is it gonna bring us to mention users by other different parameters and eventually to the eugenics and thinking of how to affect the human race in this way? This is, let's say, one of the provocative points to think of. And the next one is the questions for the designers and to architects to think of. So how can we mitigate the cultural controversies which are happening with the dating services and the digital realm of it? How can we design the physical space which would compensate for these digital things, and whether they will be interesting for people more than digital services, and how the hybrid spaces would work in this new reality. Next slide, conclusions, and finally the list of the conclusions. So let's say that the dating culture is being affected by the biggest changes in the marriage, in the family structure which we live since many years, and internet is of course taking part in it, but we cannot say that it's the main of it. Dating apps, they changed, their perception by people changed in the past years. Tinder is a fantastically designed service. It's super addictive and so on. It works as an instrument in terms that you can find different things from it, and both positive and negative experiences. It has all the traits of internet age, which we talked before, and it adapts to the cultural differences and makes them more evident. And of course, it changes the way that we interact with the public spaces. So that's pretty much it. In the postscriptum, you can find a movie and an article on the modern family to watch and read them. And let's say this way we can finish the presentation. Hello? Marco?
Yulya.
Yes.
Okay, so we have questions for Yulya. First of all, thanks a lot. Amazing lecture. I would say it is Columbia very nice and I impressed me, so very well done. And
Thanks.
So let's see if you want to say some questions for you.
No questions? Okay.
Did you travel to those cities? How do you with people and places?
Okay, yes, I traveled. I was in Milan, in Moscow. Yeah, physically in Milan and Moscow and in Lisbon, and I talked to people in different places. But let's say I also talked to people who used it in France, in Switzerland, in States. So let's say it was both. And I'm planning to try to travel using Tinder possibility in a way that you can stay in Milan but see people who use it in different places. Okay, so now we type the questions, sorry. Okay, which one of 4 main issues is more problematic? Constantly connected and so on. I'd say that as I told, the mediated one for Tinder is very crucial point. It is both not letting you to find out well the person before meeting them, and it sometimes leads to the weird conversations which are very offensive, to all these Tinder nightmares books and so on, which, as I told you, that when you communicate to a person on the internet with a small messaging box without seeing their faces, you get outrageous and you just can say whatever things. That's very bad in these terms. And then, of course, others, they getting involved, but it depends. For example, the networked one is very crucial if you live in a small town and you don't see people around you on Tinder. This service doesn't work for you then. So this is very big one, but it depends on your location again. So the universally one, the mediated conversations, for me, I'd say it's the very important one and big one. Why do I think Italians do it better? Well, it's because the of the observations which were happening in terms of communication, that they were really interested in getting to know me. They were asking a lot of questions. Sometimes, of course, the questions were, where are you from, what are you doing in Milan, and so on. Okay, but in terms of communication, they were much more active and leading the conversations and really interested in terms. And in these terms, Russians were, there's the theory that in Russia, actually, there's 1 million more, in Moscow, there's 1 million more women than men. And that's why women behave in a different, or sorry, men behave in a different way, that they know that they're precious, let's say. And they don't really try to impress you, they don't try to be interested in you, and so on. They behave like they are the ones who should be treated in this way. And so this was what I observed, that the communication online was not that interested. Like, as I said, for example, I laughed so much online with the conversations which were happening on Tinder in Italy. And I shared so much of the screenshots with my friends and so on. There was interesting stories happening. And in Moscow, I was really just swiping, and there were no big interesting results, let's say, to share. So that's why I'd say so far Italians do it better. Any other questions? Is it your Tinder approach to people location-wise? In which sense? I'm not sure I'm understanding this question. Do you behave towards people differently according to location in which you are, both in same city and different cities, countries? Actually, yes, that can be a big point, of course, because when you do this kind of research on Tinder, of course, you cannot also take yourself out of it. So also, of course, my actions could be important, and also could be important that people see that I'm not, it's stated that I'm not living in Moscow, so they know that I'm there just for not that long time and so on. But as I said, I have heard of the same reaction to a friend of mine, actually, who also lives in Milan and is visiting Moscow. But we will never know, because this way you need to maybe when some friends, my friends from Moscow, which are initially Russian, will come and stay in Moscow now, will come to Milan, we can have the opposite comparison. But let's say now I cannot say if it's me or if it's them. It can be both. Let's say anyway, even if I didn't behave in any way when I just swiped people right. There was no implications in that behavior. Then when they saw that I'm from Milan or something, maybe my profile doesn't look Russian anymore, and they thought that they couldn't get where I'm from and so on, and were not interested. So it's difficult to say. Okay, another question coming. When you had dates, how did you felt emotionally? Were people just looking for hookup, or also to get to know you and maybe something more? How did your reaction felt about that? Just as I said, when I had date, it was completely out of experimentation. It was absolutely genuine, and I was really interested in people and getting to know them. So just as I said also that I didn't notice any hookup ideas in them. They were mostly super gentlemen and behaving super nicely. So I completely cannot say anything bad about dates. It was super nice experience. And in the moments when we, let's say, there were dates when we didn't want to proceed anymore, it was just, you get to know people, and because you met online, you met them for 1 or 2 times. So eventually you get to know them better, and you understand that, okay, we are not gonna match further. It's not going on, I don't know, to be something interesting and so on. Okay, Marco Colin. Hey.
I'm back.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, as I was saying, I felt very well emotionally in terms of meeting new interesting people. It was a genuine emotion, not an experiment.
If there's no other questions, I have just 2 comments, and then we can move to next activity. But then if you are trying for something, please do. Okay, she's asking if you have any problems with profiles, like relational ones, and how you solve them.
In which sense?
Some misunderstanding to hook up to stalkers.
Yeah, well, misunderstanding about the intentions, they were some, but there were not misunderstandings, let's say. People were claiming that clearly that I'm here for sex or something. Or they were asking, they were like, what are you looking here on Tinder? So it was getting quite fast to understand what people were seriously looking for. So in this sense, there were no confusions. But with the stalkers, it's right. But with the stalkers, it happened with the people that I didn't match. So they didn't get to write to me on Tinder, and they was stalking me on other services like Facebook, Instagram. At first, I connected Instagram, and I got like a lot of likes of my selfies from the many months before, and this was seriously weird, so I disconnected it. But then, yeah, stalkers in a sense that they write on Facebook because they didn't get right to you on Tinder, and so I just explained them that, you know, you have to probably follow the rules of the game, and that stalking is not acceptable for me. So yeah, no.
Because I know you don't. I mean, it is kind of based on a prejudice that is these kind of apps, these kind of services, these kind of relational environments, they might lead to misbehaviors, to bad behaviors. But unfortunately, I don't think there's some correlation or relation can be between how these kind of relational environments and things happening. I think statistics would say that it's the same in real life. And if you get, I don't know, it's like when you're in a plan and then you're on one guy trying to go out to have a deal. What you do, you have ways to have the situation with the guy. And like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, they have a lot more tools to mediate your relation with people and also for unwanted people. So it's interesting because somehow if you use it consciously and you're aware of your position as a subject on a digital environment, then you can mediate a lot more for a lot more than also a lot more the relationship you have.
Yeah, I can agree and disagree with that because it's, let's say, when it comes to the serious stuff, like someone really being offensive, it's really easier to match or to unmatch them and to block them. You can also complain to Tinder and they will look at your complaint and eventually block him from the using application. At the same time, it's true that you usually don't, like, if you go to the bar and the girl, you say hi to the girl and she doesn't want to talk to you, you don't call her an ugly idiot and so on. You're not talking. Okay. No, I would say that in a way, people things that some people, well, the things that you can see on the internet, people saying on Tinder, they are not nice because they can say just in the chat, just writing some words without saying it in the face of the person. That's for sure. But I didn't face these conversations on my own. I didn't have that experience, so I don't know how it happens. Okay.
So, first of all, so in terms of methodology, research, the way it's presented, everything, it's very very long.
Thank you.
It's a very good lesson how to make investigation, both in digital and in physical environment. So in terms of methodology, both this lecture and the previous one, they should be exactly for you. The way I presented and whatever.
Thank you.
Very short commentary related to what we've been talking about. So it looks like that we have now as you get it looks like. So it's not like it's part of my life, whatever. What we are showing us today demonstrate that on the contrary, a huge amount of different kinds of social interactions can happen on a daily basis. And the way we behave on it, they're effective. So it's not just like striking, okay, matching the bank. It's not complicated and it's affecting the way we live. Because the last one, this is very interesting, was shows how a huge phenomenon like in the numbers that are bigger than probably many other companies in the world, it can affect the way we live. Also, I'd like a lot of this concept of the effect of music on our life, the concept of interest in therapy, or music as a right to work ourselves. Because Yulya used it like that, so this is very interesting, because this is necessary to make your feedback. Then the last one, that meeting with apps has answers that change according to location. So the research we are doing is not just a replica of what Yulya did, we have the contrary, the contribution to the phase or Mexico phase of investigation on global dating systems. So that's very interesting because it makes unique what you do here and not a replica. And last but not least,
Yes?
who was the date you had on Christmas Day? Because you had last day with my family.
Yes, and then I had a date after now. Not even, no. No one from your family.
So it wasn't my father.
No, absolutely.
And not even a cousin.
No.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're done. In Italy, it's 1 o'clock.
Yes, at night.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry for taking longer than I supposed.
Say ciao. Thanks.
Ciao. Ciao. Good luck to you.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.